In this episode, I'm inviting you to get curious about how you get annoyed and how you judge people. I am joined by Alia, someone who has done my Discover program, and together the two of us explore our own patterns around judging and getting annoyed. And it's a really fun episode because we do two things. Well, we actually do three things. We move towards what's at the core, the reasons why we find ourselves judging and annoying. We also create more space around our patterns of judging and getting annoyed so that we have more understanding and compassion for why we find ourselves in these patterns. And then we also have a conversation around how judging and getting annoyed are actually some really healthy pieces that we can pause and pay attention to because there's a message in why we're judging or why we're getting annoyed. So, I encourage you to download the experiential guide to support you in following along so you have a little more of a sense of the map that I am guiding Aaliyah with and guiding myself with because I personally also do a deep dive into one of my patterns and I am intrigued to see where it takes you. So feel free to reach out if you have questions. Feel free to share what it is you learn about yourself. And here's to building a different relationship to being human and judging and getting annoyed. So I'm joined by Aaliyah today. And Aaliyah and I know each other from Discover. You did Discover 2 years ago?
21.
21. So it's 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago. Crazy. Where does time go? Time is
I don't know.
weird.
So weird. So
Yeah.
weird.
But I'm extremely excited to have you here because I love your energy and I love how excited you get about uncovering your patterns and diving into the depths of who we are. So I was stoked when you reached out and you were like, I want to explore judging and annoyance. And I was like, good, because I also want to explore it. And getting to do it alongside you, it's really exciting because I know, um, well, I have a feeling both of us will have very unique ways of kind of sharing our perspective on judging and annoying. So I'm really excited to have you here.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I'm definitely an expert.
Yeah,
Definitely an expert
right?
on judging
I
and
know.
getting annoyed. Yeah.
It's funny for me because I was like, back in the day, I used to be, nothing would bug me, nothing would annoy me. So now when things annoy me, I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm getting annoyed. It's information. And the depths of what I've learned from my ability to judge have been like, oh, Nicole, whoa, interesting. So I'm glad I have another pro judger here alongside me. So I
Yeah, I
want
feel
to,
like
you
go
go.
ahead. I was just gonna say I feel like I always want to say that I'm laid back and I don't judge and I'm like nice and chill. Like my whole life I've tried to be like that, but now I'm embracing it.
I think it's a good thing to embrace. It's funny because so many spiritual practices, right, are like focus on non-judging. And it's like, no, we need to judge. It's really good information when we learn to listen to our judgments. So we're definitely going to dive into that, is like the benefit of judging and getting annoyed and how we can use that as information. And judging and annoying can also be a brilliant survival pattern. So let's start with you sharing a little like, how do you notice yourself judging and getting annoyed, and how does it impact your life? And I'll share the same.
So I think that I've been thinking a lot about this for the last couple days since we've decided to do it. And I think that for me, I get real judgmental when I feel like people are judging me and people are like know everything and they come at you like I know everything and or telling me what to do. I get real like, who do you think you are? And just really like I start trying like I'm better than them. So stop acting like you're better than me. And I
Mm,
think it's insecurity that's coming from. And like that's just super annoying. So if I hear you need, I completely constrict, immediately constrict. You need if I just hear that, I'm like, nope, I'm going to shut down. I'm going to lash out at you, probably. So that's kind of what, so I feel like it's really annoying, and it's all like in one place.
Yeah.
And I also think that, like, I don't trust myself
Mm.
because I'm insecure. Like, you're telling me something, and that's how it like really affects my life. And anger, like, I just feel like anger is just I'm just full of anger a lot
Yeah.
of the times because I have like all these people in my life that are like just know-it-alls.
Yeah. So the judgment shows up when there's already judgment in the room. And that's also where the annoyance comes in, right? It's all an entangled mess where there's annoyance and judgment present as soon as someone else is a bit of a know-it-all or has their own judgments towards you. It's just like, whoop, there's the judgment, there's the annoyance, there's the anger, and also in that, I'm guessing the defensiveness and then also the shutdownness from the depth of the experiences that are also intertwined with it all.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like it. I like it. It's similar to me, but also slightly different because I judge silently. I'm like judging in the background. And I heard someone use the analogy of like, someone's on stage putting on a performance and I'm like outside of the performance hall, like judging out through the little peephole, like, ugh, they don't know what they're talking about. They're idiots. Meanwhile, I'm like hidden in the back alley while they're showing up and putting on the performance. And that's where my judgment shows up the most is when someone's showing up and sharing what their perspectives, their knowledge, their wisdom and I have this judgment towards the way they're doing it or the information that they're putting out there. And it's for me this outward experience where I'm I'm not looking at myself. It's all outwards on them. And there's a bit of like a blamey flavor to it. Like I kind of feel like I'm dumping a little bit. And in it, I also notice myself protected. It's like, well, so similar to you, where it's like, well, I know better, and I'm keeping myself protected and small in the process. So I keep myself hidden while I perceive them as, being out there, being open to share where I'm keeping myself small. That's where it shows up the most for me. And it's funny because the annoyance doesn't show, well, I guess I'm annoyed at them, but it's more judgment. My annoyance, though, shows up in a totally different territory. For me, annoyance shows up when someone else isn't taking responsibility for their humanness, really. And so it's been so fascinating for me to watch where I get annoyed because then ultimately I am judging them, right, in what they have capacity for and what I expect them to be living up for or up to. And this is where, for me, and again, we'll get into like more appropriate annoyance and judgment versus, survival pattern annoyance and judgment in a bit. But for me, that annoyance means I have no compassion for them. I'm expecting them to be able to do something that they actually don't have the ability to do. So there's this survival quality to it because there's these expectations and these projections, and I get annoyed when people can't meet me in those places. So those are the ways they show up for me.
I can really relate to that people don't have the capacity and that annoyance. I can really relate to that.
Yeah, right. It's just like, come on.
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah.
mean you can't do that? What do you mean you're
Yeah.
not doing
Yeah.
that? Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You did. Yeah. And it's the people that know it's available, and they can't find the capacity for it.
Yeah.
Like, if somebody was just didn't if somebody just was gonna lose their shit for, can I cuss?
Yes. Cuts away.
Lose it just because of what just whatever, but they're like, I know I shouldn't be upset about this, but I am. You're like, then
Yeah.
don't be upset about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stop it. Stop doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Totally. So, what I want to invite listeners to do is to also reflect on your own relationship with judging and getting annoyed. Like, think of a few examples of where you would judge or where you get annoyed. And then the next thing I want to invite us to do is to look at our experience, because of course I love geeking out about how I experience myself when I'm in my patterns. And what we'll do from there is start to tease it all apart to see what of our patterns around judging and annoyance are rooted in survival, or some form of protecting ourselves, or some form of managing and controlling things, or distracting us from, feeling our own experiences. So we'll first look at how we're experiencing ourselves in the judgment and in the annoyance, and then we'll do some digging around, and Aaliyah and I will be the models of ways we can unravel what's at the core of it all and see where that takes us. And then, yeah, those of you listening, I encourage you to use similar approaches to learn more about yourself and your own relationship with judging and getting annoyed. So let's talk about how we experience ourselves. Um, like sometimes I find it easiest. I mean, we can use a situation, we can reflect on a situation to see what happens in the moment. And there's a difference in between like reflect on a situation and think about what you experienced then when you were judging or annoying. What I'm more interested in, and this is for all of us to think about, is when we reflect on a situation, what do we experience in the moment that allows us to gain insight on the way our nervous system is firing and our body and our physiology is shifting, that really gives us clues on how we move into these patterns of judging and being annoyed. So, do you want to start, Aaliyah?
Yeah.
So when you and so I said a situation, you can reflect on a situation. Personally, it's even easier for me to just think of the word judging and I already feel myself in it. I don't even need the situation to feel some level of activation. So if you want a word or just reflect on a situation, you don't have to share what it is. I'm more interested in what changes in your experience.
So I would say definite constriction in my chest. Shoulders get tight. I probably feel a little vibrating in my legs,
Mhm.
like that I need to run out of this situation energy, like my feet get kind of tingly. Yeah.
Nice.
And then I feel like I need to yell. I need to yell.
Yeah.
And I don't yell at people because that scares the shit out of me. So
Put the
then it
brakes
just
on
feels like
yelling.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It starts with maybe there's more before it. I don't know. We'll see. But what you're describing is like, okay, the tension comes in, the tightening and the tension, and then the shoulders, and then there's energy in the legs and the impulse to express, but then the brakes come on, and it's like, well, don't express. So all this energy builds up, but then there's a braking system stopping that energy from doing anything.
Right.
Yeah, cool.
Right. And then it just stays there for as um how it forever probably.
Until the idiot gets out of the room or out of my way.
Right, right, right. I had a bad day and there was definitely judgments and annoyance happening.
Mhm.
And my neighbor, and I'm not a crier, I don't cry very much, and my neighbor was like, how are you? And I was like, I'm in a rage and I need to cry and I can't cry. And she goes, do you need a hug? And then she hugged me and it was
Mm.
just like waterworks, like it just
Oh,
all came out. Now I'm watching a TV show that makes me cry every two episodes, so it's like
oh,
thank God for her, right?
congratulations. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so nice, but that's usually what happens is it just stays there
Yep,
for
it all gets
and
bottled
there's
up.
no release.
Yeah, yeah. I love that you named that because there's something so powerful in being met by someone who cares.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what so many of us are missing is to be met by the empathic witness, by to be met by someone who cares. And it doesn't even have to be like someone really caring and like holding all the space for you. It's like the neighbor who just offers a hug that shows like, I got you. I'm here with you. I see you. You know, the power of someone caring is, in my
Yeah.
opinion, one of the most powerful things out there. So I'm
Yeah.
so stoked for you to have experienced that.
It was
I re
perfect.
I recently had, this is a sidebar, nothing on annoyance or judging, but um I left the step of my RV down and I hit the tire of a parked truck. The t tire wheels were pointed out and my step hit the wheel and ripped my whole step out, ripped my whole side panel out. And I was in Vancouver and pulled over on the side of the road and it was just a disaster. And I had a friend Jen, who has been on the team of Discover. I think you know Jen. Anyways, she was
I
there
think so.
and yeah, and she was offering some support, but what was the most powerful support was a stranger walking by who was like, "How can I help?" And helped rip the step off for me. And that care of a stranger, not
Mhm.
even knowing that he's having impact, had the most amount of impact for me. Like, wow, someone cares. Someone that doesn't even need to care cares, Like there's something so juicy about that. And it's interesting because I'll weave in judgment here. Because before he offered to help, my friend had judgment about him by his looks, by where he was going. And her judgments were accurate, but they were judgy in a way where there was kind of a defensiveness about it instead of like empathy or care towards him. So it's just so interesting, this dance we do in between judging and caring, and how we often judge and that impacts how we let care in. Because I believe most of us have the ability to care for one another.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. How about, well, I'll share my judgment and then we'll go into annoyance because I feel annoyance in a very different way. So, judgment for me, when I feel judgment, I very quickly move into a protection mode. Like I feel myself get a little bigger, I get a little more defensive. It's kind of like I'm ready to stand my ground and prove myself as long as no one's really looking. But there's this like take up space, more a broadening that happens for me. And yeah, a little quality of self-righteousness as well, of just this "Mm, like, nope, you don't get it." Like that kind of a little bit of attitude. But yeah, the biggest thing is I feel a broadening in my chest and I really feel myself ground into the ground. And as we explore this a little bit more, I'm always curious with our patterns, like, well, what happens before that? What happened before I got defensiveness, right? And for you, what happens before the tightening and that energy of wanting to run? So we'll let's dip into that right now and then we'll go into annoyance.
Yeah.
So for you, is there any awareness? And this is again, I want to point out to those listening. We're doing some reflecting, but we're also just listening in the moment as we notice these patterns. Like for me, I just have to think about judging and I can feel my back get long and my shoulders go broad. Um, and we want to just see what happens before that. And the reason why we do this is then we can notice the earlier signs of how our patterns unfold. So, are you aware, Leah, of anything that happens before the tightening and the tingling in your legs?
I don't think I can. I feel like it's just anger. Like I just get mad.
Hmm.
Like that like mind, like, why is this person talking or
Hmm.
still talking?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like, it's this anger.
Yeah. Perfect. So the emotion almost comes before the tightening and the legs tingling. Would you
Yeah.
agree? Yeah. It might
Yeah,
even be mixed into the
definitely.
tightening. Like the tightening might be part of the anger.
Right, right. And
Yeah.
sometimes your brain just goes numb.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if this is but you're just like, your brain just goes numb. You're like, is
Yeah.
this yeah.
And that's quite common when we're moving into more sympathetic tone, that fight energy, that survival energy, thinking isn't important, right? So it's like, oh, well, I don't need to think anymore. I just need to move into this action mode, right? So it's like all
Right.
thoughts go on offline. Now I just need to be in this anger fight mode. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like red and then, but it's not always that intense. Like
No.
it's not that intense all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So right now in this moment, can you feel the flavors of the anger? Can you access that?
I can always access anger.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, definitely, definitely.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
far, how we're kind of unraveling your pattern is it's like, okay, anger's right there, as well as this tightening, and then it's followed by the legs tingling, maybe running energy, but then inability to express.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you okay to stay with us? And then we'll switch to mine.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
Perfect. So what I'm curious about, and for those listening too, it's like, well, can you also relate to with judgment? Is there anger? Maybe you can, maybe it's something else. But in the anger, there's something, oh, what is it? There's something right before the anger that I'm curious about. So can you feel what I'm talking about? So what we're doing here, and this is what I love to do. It's kind of like we've got this pattern that we're so familiar with, and it happens so quickly. We don't really actually know all the threads that are entwined in between it. And just by us pausing and taking some time to get curious about the threads and untangle it a little, we're becoming aware of the little nuances of what happens before that anger that's so readily available comes online. So I can just feel the flavors of it, but do you want to put some words to it? What's there before the anger?
I would say like
Hmm.
helplessness
Yeah.
and um and I'm so bad with words. Which is why I can't fight back because I feel
Hmm.
like even that like it intertwines like helpless and stupid.
Hmm.
Like I can't compete with or not even compete, but I can't have a conversation with this person because they knows more about me than I know about myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So the helplessness has that freeze quality to it. And then in comes the
Yes.
anger, because that's something you can actually feel, even though it doesn't express. There's at least this energy that's kind of entangled with the feeling of helplessness. Yeah. Okay. So in the helplessness, so to me, the helplessness and kind of the feeling, the experience that's there, that to me is more like what's at the core of it, right? It's like there's an experience of helplessness. My guess too is like there's a little bit of shock or confusion in it. Does that resonate? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it's like we're seeing what's at the core of this pattern of anger and judgment, right? There's this helplessness, there's shock, there's confusion. My guess is also aloneness, right? There's no one that cares in that moment. There's this sense of really being alone in this confusing, intense experience. And
Yeah.
and we're really seeing why then the helplessness comes in. So then, well, fine, then I'll express in anger or feel the energy of anger and project with judging to protect myself from feeling the intensity of this helplessness.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So are you aware of, like, as we're talking about it, can you feel like little things happening?
Definitely, definitely. I feel my like throat it feels like my throat feels not it's like opening up. It's not like you talk what you were just saying just like opened me up and then I feel just my face just feels like it wants to I don't know I
Mm-hmm.
can't put it
Mm-hmm.
into words but really it's like my throat
Yeah.
is like this is all true. You're confused, you're helpless, you don't understand why this happens to you,
Yeah.
and it's upsetting. And it's like I
Yeah.
want to cry, but
Yeah. So what we're doing here is we're teasing apart the layers to see what's at the core of it and then just acknowledging what is, right? And similar to the neighbor that just wanted to give you a hug and was just there, it's not that we're trying to fix anything here or, solve any problems. We're just being the witness to your experience, right? And allowing there to be more space to actually be in the experience. And it's interesting. I mean, for me, I feel things quite easily. And what it feels like to me is it's like your throat and like this, like, what? I'm being seen in this. It's kind of like it's pendulating a little, right? Where it's like open to the possibility, then kind of shutting back off a little. Can you feel that happening?
well, and I feel like that's what the tear that like that's
Uh,
I'll get a tear and then it'll suck right back up. Like literally, like
yeah.
that happens all the time. Like it just sucks back up. And that's
Yeah.
what this feels like. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. So one way you could explore that is even just see if you can slow it down a little. This kind of like moving into the edge of discomfort and then the brake comes on again and you get sucked back, right? So there's this place where you can actually slow that down. There you go. Right? And then it allows
Hmm.
a little more room. Can you feel how you're now just riding a little wave through it?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. People listening are like, what are you talking about, Nicole? But what happens when we kind of are teasing things apart like this, we're starting to see the subtle layers of what's at play. And then when we tease it apart and we slow it down, it allows the system to actually discover something else is possible. And can you feel how, like, the need to go back and forth isn't there? Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, yep. I love this work so much.
I was gonna say it's magic, listeners. It's magic.
And it's
It
not.
is. And it's not right. Anybody can do it.
So all we did there is slowed it down enough for the system to feel safe enough where it could feel the edge of the discomfort without it being too overwhelming and needing to shut everything down again, right? And I see it as like you moved through a layer of that and now there's maybe an experience of less helplessness or less um yeah, less, well, I'll let you describe it. What's your experience having ridden through a little bit of that piece?
Well, it feels like it kind of expanded instead of it being so small. So it's not so small anymore. It's like bigger, but
Hmm.
not.
Hmm.
Because all we did was slow it down. We did I w- it didn't get any bigger. It just got slower, making it more kind of I'm going to say more comfortable.
Hmm.
It feels more comfortable than it was before. Like it's kind of like when you're having anxiety and you're panicking kind of. That's kind of the way it felt at first, or being manic, or there was some kind of wild energy to it, and now the energy is just a lot less. It's
Yeah,
still there.
of
It's still
course.
there and I still
Yeah.
notice it, but that it's not as big. It
Yeah.
doesn't feel as big.
Beautiful. So how I describe that is it's like we've just increased your window a little bit, right? It's like before you'd be quicker to the pattern or quicker to the anger, right? Whereas now you have more capacity to be in that level of discomfort where there's that feeling of helplessness or feeling of the confusion alone, what's going on, right? That has shifted a little bit, but also a lot. And there's still more layers there. And this is what I love about this work. It's like, well, yeah, as much as I'd love to wave the magic wand and have it all be gone, we're working at shifting these patterns or what's at the core of these patterns a little at a time because then our need for the pattern becomes less and less and less, or our ability to observe ourselves in it and recognize choice points becomes more available, right?
Yeah.
So what we did is we started just by noticing, how the pattern shows up in your physiology, what your experience is in the pattern, and then we teased it apart a little to see what are the earlier stages of the pattern so we could find what was at the core of it. This place where you're stuck in the threat response cycle, which is something I speak to all the time. And, from that place, the more we shift what you're stuck in, the need for the pattern starts to also transform. So if you even just think about judging at this moment, how does that feel different?
It definitely feels different. It feels like calm.
Hmm.
It feels like I can judge, but it's not, I'm not going to judge with my heart. Maybe I'll just do it with my mind, is kind of how it
I
feels.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it was like my heart might not be in it, or my body might not be as much in it, but my mind can do whatever the hell it wants.
Hmm. And it's from that place, there's more space to be in the judgment. The judgment doesn't take over, and then there's the anger, and then there's the need to flee, and then the shutdown. My guess might be, even if required, there might be more capacity to actually say something from this place. I mean, maybe that's pushing it, but it's at least there's more room to possibly say something.
I hope so.
Yeah.
My people won't be happy about it, but that's okay.
Yeah, right? What? Something's different here. I don't know if I like this.
Like, wait, why is she saying this? I don't
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah. So if I were, I won't take up the time to do it on myself, but if I were to inquire myself, I would do the same thing. So those listening, you can do the same thing where it's like, okay, here's this pattern. So for me, this kind of like broaden my shoulders, take up space, even though I'm keeping myself small. I could see if I can pinpoint what happens before I broaden my shoulders, before I get taller or take up more space. Um, Another way I'll sometimes explore with it too is like, well, what happens if I just do less of the pattern that I find myself in? And usually that also shows me this edge where I feel slightly uncomfortable. And all that's doing is it's just giving us more information on why we do the pattern that we do, why we move into these different ways of protecting ourselves or doing what we do, whatever it is we do. So let's let's shift into annoyance. And then if there is time, I can talk myself through it. But it just it's weird to, I don't think I've ever talked myself through. I mean, I do it
I
all the
think you
time
totally
on
should.
my own, but yeah, to do it on my, like talk it outwardly, that's, yeah. So let's do annoyance and then I'll see where our time's at and then we can go from there.
That's good.
Okay. So
All right.
annoyance, well, it's interesting because annoyance might already feel different too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Um, I would say annoyance is more like high and screechy, and like that's how it feels like Urkel saying, "Did I do that?" Just like that's the
Amazing.
kind of stuff you're annoyed with, that like, "Did
Uh-huh.
I do that?" Like that's how it feels. It feels high
Hmm.
up above my head, and it feels screechy. And I mean, this is the definition of annoying, right? Um, yeah, that's all I can like access.
I like it. I like it. And right, we're just looking at the experience. And I know because of Discover, you know a little bit more of how I work, and there's the ability to stay out a story. It's more about the experience that you're describing. And that's what I really want to invite people into is like, if you think about being annoyed, what happens? So for me, it's funny because, like I said earlier, getting annoyed is newer for me. I can, I can actually right now in this moment feel like a pulling back and a clenching of my jaw, a little flavor of anger, but then I can also just be like, no, no, it's fine. I can also feel that like, which I haven't actually noticed for a while, so that's interesting. There's this quick like into the annoyance, into some anger, and then a softening forward again of like, no, 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 you're fine, you're good, you're good. So that's interesting. Again, the thread of the pattern for me is like, oh, there's a pulling back, holding definite, yeah, holding in my breath, pulling back in my head and my spine, a flavor of anger, clenching my jaw, and then very quickly the put the dampener on that and everything's fine. It's not a big deal. Yeah. So interesting, hey?
That's suck
Annoyance.
back.
That's suck back. Suck back,
That's
suck
suck
up.
back.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm. So then again, maybe I'll talk myself through it and then we can explore yours. So for me, if I notice the first flavors of the sucking back, and I'm gonna slow it down. Oh, there's some emotion there. Yeah, there's sad. I'm noticing, well, I don't quite know what it is, but I'm noticing a welling in the back of my eyes. I think uh, it's this is funny because I usually am just in the experience and I'm not putting words to it. I'm like, how do I put words to this? Which is good
I know
practice
it's
for me.
hard.
It is.
Welcome to my world, our world. Anybody who works
Right?
with you. Yeah.
So what it feels like is happening is by slowing down this pulling back, I'm giving more opportunity for that to be acknowledged and to be felt. And there's a flood of emotion in it. The emotion isn't quite clear yet. That's a little more of a what's called undercoupled or missing piece for me. But it's almost because it's this is all before the anger is even there. It's what it really feels like is yeah, being seen in something not being okay. Like being witnessed or being for it to be okay to not be okay. For it to be okay that something upset me or is annoying me. That's what it feels like is there's finally space for me to not be okay in something annoying me, frustrating me, which is really cool. So I can feel myself holding back a little bit of the emotion still. Just a little bit of a dampening, like I'm kind of trying to contain it. And I'm noticing that by like there's a tightening in my chest. There's a lot of sensation right now in my chest and in my shoulders, and it's almost like a little bit of conflict. Like my shoulders are trying to hold me upright while my what's happening in my chest and what I'm containing wants to move outwardly and move. So I'm just going to play with that for a second. There's this I'm kind of similar to what you did. I'm teasing apart this holding that my shoulders want to do and even my intercostals, my ribs, muscles in between my ribs. So I'm following that a little in what they want to do. Oh, that's intense. And it's like a quivering on the inside of my ribs when I'm following it. I'm following it first because that's what it wants to do. And then I'm letting it do what it wants to do. And now there's a bit of shaking in my sternum. A breath just came. And there's the emotion again. So what I just did is I followed what wanted to protect me from feeling the emotion, the containing, the thing that would stop what felt like too much emotion, too much experience. And I can still feel like a teetering of like wanting to contract again, but then starting to open. So I'm just going to follow the opening a little. And again, like I feel it in the muscles in between my ribs. And it's not so much my heart. It's more like the space in between my ribs and my lungs. And again, this is you people listening are probably like, what are you talking about, Nicole? But this is the joys of doing this work is you get to work in all these subtle layers. Yeah, I'm really aware of this contraction and expansion that's kind of happening in my chest. And by working with those nuances, we're allowing other things to become possible. And it doesn't need to make sense what's going to become possible, but it's what I'm doing right now is looking for the place where something different gets to emerge or be felt or be experienced. There's some more exploring for me to do here, but I'm going to pause because it's hard for me to talk about it and be in it. Um, But what was really cool for me, what's new for me, was that moment where I got to be acknowledged in feeling something that I wouldn't usually let myself feel. So I'm excited. That's a new piece for me. So I'm excited to explore that space more and how it's how I'm holding not feeling in my ribs is how it's showing up for me right now, how I'm really noticing it. Anything to reflect or questions as an observer?
Quivering is like that happened. I feel quiver a lot. I've never had that word, so thank you for that word. So
Mm,
next time, next time I'm in session, I can say it's a quivering. Um, and it's just I you're so beautiful in the way that you express this stuff. And when you would do like work with us during Discover, you would pinpoint like there's a space in between my ribs and my lungs, like you did today. And it's just like, and we don't know that that even exists.
hmm.
One time you said, we were doing something, you said, how can I, do you mind if I go back to the, do you mind if I go to the back of the bottom of your heart? Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
What do you
Back of the
mean?
bottom of my
Put your
what?
attention
Like,
on your
I don't
heart. What?
get it. And now every time I feel heartbroken, every time I feel unsafe, I go to the back of the bottom of your heart. Like that is like one of my
Hmm.
it's just one of my things that I get to do. Like your heart's like being held. Just just it was beautiful to see you do that. You did a wonderful job. I know you usually just feel through it, but you're always so eloquent and just like with the way, yeah. And I'm a big Nicole fan. This is not a this is not a secret. I love her.
Thanks, Leah.
But like that was really really fascinating to
Hmm.
listen to you do that.
Well, thank you for witnessing me too, because that's part of it is like, yes, I can do this on my own. I can go into the depths on my own, but also to be witnessed in it and to slow it down with someone and name it and articulate it is actually really important to me and a good practice for me. So thank you for holding the space for me to articulate and be witnessed in it. Because I do believe that yes, we can do a lot of work on our own, but the more we do it in community and witness and support each other in it, like the field we can hold for each other is what really supports the deeper healing to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So to me, that community piece and being in connection when we're doing our explorations is so rich and so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I just did again, same thing as what you did, Aaliyah, is I went more to the core of what's brewing underneath the reason why I move into this protected form of annoying, right? And for some of you listening, that you'll be like, what the hell are you talking about? Right? Like I love playing and listening to the nuances of what's happening in my physiology and in my overall experience. But for some people, going inward or like looking more at what is at the core is not as available. And that's where I just invite you to notice how you can tease apart how your patterns unfold while also noticing just like, well, what happens if I do a little less of that pattern? Mhm. So the other direction we can move is we can notice how we feel towards the parts of us that get annoyed. So let's do that just to see, just so we can demonstrate the other direction of which we can work. So one direction is we work more towards what's at the core of it. The other direction is moving more towards creating space around it so we have more of the ability to be the empathic witness for the ways we show up in the world versus, being annoyed at ourselves for being annoyed. So for you, do you have a sense of how you feel towards it could be towards your annoying or being judgy? How do you feel towards your patterns of getting annoyed and being judgy? Either or.
Well, with annoyance, I can talk shit. I can like get on the phone or I can get on a call and be like, "Can you believe this?" Blah, 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 blah." With judgment, I don't have that. I don't do that as much. When I'm judging, I'm but if I'm in but it's all this, I mean, really it's the same. Like if I'm annoyed, I'm judging, and if I'm judging, I'm annoyed. Um, but it
There's
just
just certain
it
places where you can actually vent about it or talk about
yeah,
it or yeah.
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 And it shows up differently, but it kind of it it's similar. I would say that I feel justified. I feel like better than other people when I'm
Hmm.
I'm annoyed with them, and that's like one of my core wounds is everybody's better than I am. So that feels really good.
Uh-huh.
It feels really good. And so
And
I think that that's kind of like just that kind of righteous bitchiness that
yes.
I get to feel when I'm annoyed.
Yes, I love it. So this is where it gets interesting because often I find people that are more judgy and annoyed easily, they like it, right? It's because it allows us to not have to feel our own experiences because we get to project outwardly, and it feels way better to project outwardly than it is to look at our own experiences. So, and in all honesty, like I like to look at humans I mean, our patterns as a spectrum. And on one end of the spectrum is those that get annoyed, that blame, that are judgy, that project outwardly. On the other end of the spectrum is the people that live in shame, right? And take on all the self-critic, the self like I'm responsible for everything versus I'm not responsible for any of it, right? And I mean, we see this in the world all the time, these two ends of the spectrum, and obviously everything in between. But there's something in that self-righteousness and that judging and that annoyance where it feels good because it is this outwardly thing. I'm fine. You're the idiots here. And what's challenging is a lot of people that live in that won't do the personal work because why would they? Because they're fine and everyone else is the idiot, you know? So if you can relate to that, I mean, kudos because you're listening, so you're already doing your own explorations. But also, if you see other people in those qualities, like recognize that chances are this is a survival pattern. It's easier to project outwardly than to have to look at our own experiences. And it feels good because it gives me a false sense of power, right? It allows me to feel, yeah, that self-righteousness. But what I find in it is I know for me, when I'm in that judgy annoyance quality that's more self-righteous, I feel alone. So there's something in that that shows me that I'm doing it out of survival, like as a survival pattern, not because there's a healthy reason to be judging or be annoyed. So how we feel towards our patterns can be quite interesting because how we feel towards them can keep us stuck in them because we like them, because it makes me feel powered, makes me feel important in this context. Whereas other patterns we might be exploring, we might have our own judgment towards our patterns, right? So
Yeah.
we might have judgment towards the fact that we judge. We might have judgment towards the fact that we get annoyed. We might have shame towards the fact that we judge and annoy. We might have frustration. I don't want to judge and annoy. I want to love everyone, right? So to just observe what is there for us in response to the patterns we see ourselves in. So for you, Aaliyah, with this experience of like, yeah, it feels good. I want to try something. I want to see if we can pan out and just acknowledge for you that that feels good. So we're acknowledging the layer of you that feels good in that annoyance and judginess. And just see what happens if you acknowledge the part of you that actually enjoys it and likes it because it does allow this sense of self-righteous and power. Anything you notice in that?
I would say maybe a little yeah, it's self-compassion.
Hmm.
It's this is a survival pattern. This is covering something up. So you like maybe not beat yourself up about it.
There's a bit more space around it, hey?
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And this is to me the ongoing practice is how do we see all the layers that are involved and how do we pause and notice which layer we're in? Are we in the judging? Are we in the self, you know, empowerment that comes from judging? Or can we pan out and just acknowledge all the layers that are at play? And to me, I mean, this is us when we land in our sense of wholeness and we can hold the many dynamics that are involved, but there's space around it. And in that space, there's more ability to choose or to get curious or to explore or simply have compassion for and hold space for being human with these many different ways of navigating how we judge and how we get annoyed. And to me,
Yeah.
like, as I feel you in that space, everything slows down a little for me as well, because I can feel myself in it as well. And it's like here we're in our humanness, there's grace, there's care, right? There's the ability to be like, yeah, of course you're annoyed. And of course it kind of feels good. It makes sense. And of course, there's something at the core of it that also needs some care and some tending too. And we get to just hold these many layers, but in a way where it's not necessarily fueling the pattern to continue to be on. It's actually creating more space for those patterns to be explored and for more wave riding, for more shifting to happen.
Hmm.
So this is us going the other way. First, you and I went inward and we looked at what's at the core of it, a little bit more of the trauma or where we're stuck in, you know, protecting ourselves or managing whatever needed to be managed. And now we're moving the other way and creating, finding, not just creating, that space is always there, but we're landing in more of that sense of space, which allows us to have the care, to have empathy, to have compassion for the ways we move through life. And this is where we can have more space around or, to judge our judging patterns less. And this is also where we have more space to judge other people less,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
from this
I
space, go ahead.
no, I just giggled because yeah, we're definitely judging ourselves probably as much as we're judging other people.
Yeah. It's just a
Yeah.
lot easier to project outwardly because
So
it's,
much easier.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So, what I wanted to name in this is like from this place where there's more space, I can have less judgment towards people, or I can see them in their survival patterns and the way they're doing what they need to do to survive or how they know how to be in the world. And it's still important to acknowledge that judgment and annoyance are healthy. So, what you and I just did is we teased apart our patterns that we're stuck in around judging and annoyance because they allow us to keep ourselves protected, to not have to feel the depths of what's at the core of it. But then there's also the importance of recognizing judgment and annoyance as a place where we can gather information. So if I'm walking down a street and I see someone approaching me and I have some judgment, I can notice if that judgment is rooted in this moment, my judgment is appropriate because I might be at threat, or is my judgment a projection rooted in my history and a form of protecting me from feeling less than or feeling whatever's at the core of it, right? Because our signals around judgment from autonomic nervous system perspective, is our instinctual cues coming online to tell us something's not okay. I'm making judgment here on if this person or if this environment, if this situation is okay or not. If we're entangled in some history around judgment, it's harder to listen to the cues relative to what's happening in our environment. The more we untangle from our history, the more we have access to our instincts and our intuition, which show up as judgment. So that's
Wow.
just, right?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So to me, it's like, let's look at judgment and how we're entangled in it, but let's also start to create more of a healthy relationship with judgment and see it as a messenger on how we then are relating to the outside world and what's happening there relative to real threats. Yeah.
Yeah,
Anything.
I appreciate you bringing healthy judgment into intuition and instinct. I think that you just you just wouldn't you're like, I'm trusting my intuition, which is absolutely a judgment. I really appreciate that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, of course. And then the same thing with annoyance. To me, annoyance is a really good cue of something not being okay. So anyone who struggles maybe with boundaries or struggles with anger or struggles with knowing like what's okay or not okay for yourself, for myself, annoyance to me is a really good cue of like something's not okay. Now, how do I measure that this annoyance is giving me information about my own values or my own needs, and that something in the room isn't meeting me there? And it's not that it's their responsibility to meet me there, but I can use that annoyance as an indicator of like, wait, something's not being met here, something's not okay. And maybe anger arises because of what's not okay, genuinely, right? It's a healthy response. Something's not okay. I'm feeling annoyed, and that annoyance leads me to anger. And again, it's not their responsibility unless, it legit is like a lack of
Unless
safety
it
and
is.
unless it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it to
Which is
me,
possible.
totally. To me, what's most important is see where you can notice annoyance as an alarm letting you know something's not okay. And then can you do some reflecting on, well, what's not okay here? What of my needs or what of my values aren't being met? And then is this an environment or a person I want to be around? Or do I need to actually create space from this because this isn't okay? This isn't what I want. This isn't safe. And I'm going to do something about it. So to me, that annoyance feels, when we look at annoyance from that perspective, it's very different because we can see it as, yeah, that alarm system of, wait, something's not okay. What is that? How do I learn more about my own boundaries, my own needs, my own values relative to my environment? Anything you want to reflect on that one?
Yeah, no, again, like I would never say that annoyance is a good thing because it's so annoying.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Right? Like I would never, but and then honestly, I was just reflecting a lot of situations that I'm in where people talk a lot and they're not stopping. I get annoyed. And it's really because whatever they're saying isn't, I can't use what they're saying. I need them to answer a question that I asked 20 minutes before. So, like what you were just saying about like not getting your needs met when you're annoyed, like that happens all the time. I'm always
Mhm.
annoyed because and I don't go, can you go back and talk about what you were talking about before? Or can you like, can you ask what, like, why are you asking me this again? Because I've told you this 14,000 times. Instead of like coming, just being annoyed instead of like, and
Yeah.
this will always be my burden to bear, is like sticking up for myself and having boundaries and being able to to talk about like, but it's that, yeah.
Yeah. So it'll
So
be cool for you
annoyance
to
just feels
see.
like shit. Yeah.
Yeah,
But there's a helplessness to it, right? There's this like,
exactly.
I can't do anything about it. This person is just talking and talking, not, or this person is asking these same questions, or this person is yelling at people, whatever the people are doing.
Yeah.
Interesting. So yeah, I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. So it'll be cool for you to see if you pause and notice you're annoyed, be like, wait, what of my needs isn't being met? What's happening here that I'm not acknowledging within myself that there's something here that's not okay? What's the thing that's not okay? And then when is their capacity to actually articulate that or stop the situation and be like, hey, let's go back to this moment. This is what's important to me. Can we work with this? When does that come online? The capacity to say something, that's the next piece. But the clearer we
Yeah.
are in what we need, that already is a step towards being able to then express it. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I love it.
cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's it. I mean, we could keep talking about it and keep exploring, but we'll leave it there for now because that was a lot of different pieces that you and I explored, and also we're inviting other people to explore. Anything else you want to add before we sign off?
I don't think so. I'm just grateful for you. Always grateful for
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, Leah. And thank you for being willing to explore always and for
Yeah.
doing your own, I need a better word than work, but your own explorations because, yeah, it only will continue to impact you and those in your life. So, yeah,
It's been, I will say something. Just, I can never shut my mouth.
I
I,
appreciate it.
I'm 48 years old. I'm just telling the listeners this. You know all this. I'm 48 years old. I got sober when I was 19. So I've been sober for almost 30 years. I have
Hell yeah.
done AA. I have done therapy. I have done psychiatry. I have done EMDR. I have done CBT. I have done every single thing in the world that you can imagine. And this was, I'm going to use the word again, this was my magic bullet. This was doing Nicole's Discover and learning about my nervous system. And now I continually see someone who was our pod leader in Discover. I see her at least once a month, and I have for the last 2 or 3 years. Um, it's like, obviously I'm not perfect, I'm not fixed, I'm not whatever, but this truly was like, this helps, and it's easy. It's like the easy, like, therapy's hard, doing amends is hard, like, self-help stuff is hard, but this is like, all you have to do is like listen to your body. So if you're listening and you're not into this, and you're just like super curious, this Nicole is definitely the place to do it.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
I appreciate it, Aaliyah.
And I have lifelong friends now too.
Yes,
And if I need
that's
to, and I'm in America, so if I need to move to Canada, I'll have an RV to visit.
exactly. Will you ever? That's my favorite part of Discover is like connecting with other people who are on a similar journey and having a community to speak the same language with or similar languages with, right? Who air quote get it in a way where you can actually have conversations about it, which that's lacking in our world still. I'm sure we're moving towards it, or it seems that way, but to have a community to speak what we're speaking here is so special. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Uh-huh. Awesome. Thank you
Yay.
so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope that this episode has provided you with new perspectives and insights, and if you haven't already, head to my website to download the experiential guide. Until the next time, I invite you to continue to pause and notice.